My name is Adrian, and I am going to tell you my abortion story. I was 15 when I left home because I lived with an abusive father who was a molester and a mother who enabled it. It was bearable when my older brothers and sister were living there, but once they all moved out, I was too much of a target, and the level of fear and it was unbearable. So I knew I had to leave. So I left when I was 15. I moved in to New York City with my brother and sister at different times, living on their couch. And I immediately hooked up with a man that was 13 years older than I was, that was the same as my father, and an alcoholic drug addict. And I got very heavy into alcohol and drugs myself. And so when I was 17, I got pregnant because in those days, actually, birth control wasn't available yet. It was against the law to have birth control. So, we were irresponsible and drunk and on drugs. And so, yes, of course, I got pregnant. I told him that I was pregnant. He said that he would stand by me. So I was considering not having an abortion. And then he turned on me and accused me of having an affair or relations with other men, and said he didn't know if it was his kid. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I was pretty much stuck. I decided that it would be a really bad thing to have a child when I was 17 and addicted to alcohol and drugs and no father available. And I decided I would get an abortion. But abortions were illegal in those days. But of course there was a way to get one, and I found my way through the bar people that all knew what was going on to a doctor in Manhattan who at the time was actually a big deal at Bellevue Hospital. And he had an illegal abortion clinic in his office. It cost me, I think it was about $300 then. Might have been $5. It was a lot of money in those days, especially for someone like myself who I wasn't working. I was living on my brother and sister's couches. I was just a mess. But I went around and borrowed money from all of the father's friends and told them what was going on. And then my brothers and sister also chipped in, and I paid for that abortion. The doctor told me that I would not be allowed to have the abortion because I had waited too long. By then I was more than 6 weeks. And I told him that I would expose him if he did not give me the abortion, and so he agreed. But he told me it would be possibly life-threatening. But I knew that I didn't want to bring a child addicted into the life that I was leading with the father that was what he was, and with no support from my parents, and no way of making a living, no education, 17 years old. So I went ahead with it. It was illegal, so they couldn't give any anesthesia or anything. They put me on a table, and they used the Swedish method, which is it's like a vacuum. But in Sweden, they were allowed to do abortions, so they gave people sedatives and painkillers so that it was not a terrible thing. But because it was illegal, they just held me down, put their hand over my mouth so I wouldn't scream and scare any of the women that were waiting in the waiting room, and put that vacuum on me and sucked that out of my body. And I have never felt any pain like that before or since. It was excruciating. I thought I was dying, and it was pretty dramatic. When it was over, I was taken into the doctor's office, and he came in and he showed me a picture of a beautiful home that he had up in the Adirondacks, and he said, This has been paid for all by illegal abortions. And then he came around the desk and got next to me and said, how about a little kiss? And kissed me full on the mouth. I was so shocked. I was so disgusted. I was so sick. I felt so, it was just so horrible. And that was just one more degrading moment in the whole process. I went home to my sister's apartment and just fell apart. It was really, really, really rough. And I bled for days and days afterwards, and I was not well. And I think I probably was a little bit infected, but I had some antibiotics. I handled it, and I had to get back to work. I had to get a job, and I had to start paying back the money that I had borrowed. So that was that. I never regretted what I did. I never felt like there would have been any kind of a chance for that child in my life with the circumstances. And I knew it was the right thing to do. And all these years later, and I'm talking 60-something years later, I know it was the right thing to do, because later in life, when I had grown up and gotten myself together, I met the love of my life, and we've been together ever since, over 50 years. We've had 3 amazing daughters that my husband delivered at home. And by the way, the pain of those childbirths was nothing like the illegal abortion that I was subjected to. I know that I made the right decision. I know that I spared that child a life of hell. And I know that I never would have been able to be the mother that I've been at that time in my life. It was right for me, and I'm glad I did it. And I'm happy with the life that I've had since then, and I'm proud of my children, proud of myself and my husband. And yes, it was a hard decision, and there's been moments when I thought about who that person might have ended up being. But I know in my heart that I made the right decision for me, even though I had to subject myself to the fear of death and a clandestine abortion where I felt like dirt and was made to feel disgusting and just so awful by that evil doctor. I had to scrape money up and beg people to help me, and you know, the whole thing was degrading and awful, and I don't want to see that go back to that. I don't want to see women going to backroom abortions. People sometimes have to terminate a birth for so many reasons. And honestly, it's inhumane to take us back to the times that I had to go through. And I just pray to God that people will think about it and put themselves in the place of the women that have to make these choices, and at least give them the dignity of a choice. Nobody's saying we have to condone it, but give the woman a choice to go to a decent place with decent people that will help them with a medical procedure that should never be done in a back room by some sick person. I hope that maybe my story will make some sense to some of you. I know for sure that if I had brought that child into the world, unequipped as I was to deal with life, and addicted, and an alcoholic, and the father, an alcoholic and an addict, it would have just been a life of hell for that child. It made no sense. There was nothing right about it. People should be able to have a choice. That's all we ask. Thank you.